that clear. Before we get any further, Flux Proof of Useful Work is just a new name for marketing to use for masternodes. Capiche? Flux is a suite of blockchain-related products that serve multiple purposes, some under different umbrellas. They do play the Shell LLC game a lot. So good luck on figuring out who all owns them, what money is invested, etc. There is some public information. I do know that they had gotten bought out by a VC capitalist for their ZIL core part, and then I believe Influx bought it back from them. So I think it's privately owned now. But there was that interaction that a lot of people had issues with, myself included, kind of like, okay, well, what's that? For those not in the know, ZIL Core is a separate product under the Flux umbrella that it holds crypto assets. It's a wallet. It is a software wallet, so not the most secure wallet, but it offers interoperability, which allows you to, swap, exchange, trade, all that sort of stuff, multiple different cryptocurrencies within its ecosystem. With ZIL Core came a lot of other things, which was like their tokenization system related to effectively what they called parallel assets. We'll get into parallel assets here in a little bit. But on top of that, under the Influx umbrella, they also have what is best described as a virtual private server based on the blockchain. People call it VPS for short, but if you're not aware of what that is, a virtual private server, there are products, big names like DigitalOcean, Vulture, etc., that offer, third-party options outside of Google, AWS, and Microsoft for hosting web servers, a whole plethora of different compute servers that you may need something for, right? Whether it's a database or whether it's a web server to host a website, basically you can go to these services, rent them out, and then put them, and then deploy them. Now, Flux does have their version of that where you do pay in the Flux token to rent these servers out, albeit they utilize, at least last I checked, and maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, they do utilize Docker and are pretty limited with their whitelist of applications. So once again, from a technical perspective, to explain this a little bit better, a whitelist is basically a list of applications that you're allowed to run on their virtual private servers. Okay. So you essentially are kind of limited to the types of workloads that you can deploy. This isn't necessarily outside of best practice for VPSs, but I would say it's a diversity of compute, allowed compute, is something that is discussed within the virtual private server space and is relevant because obviously if that application is not available on that particular service, then you're less likely to utilize that service. It is a little bit encumbering as well. I think when you talk about Flux's offering from that perspective, institutional or enterprise grade adoption is more difficult unless they're offering, stuff on the back end to people outside of that, which they totally possibly could be doing, primarily due to the fact that you have to purchase another asset to then rent the server, which is a barrier to entry for, obviously bookkeepers, that sort of thing. So there is that kind of wall there. I don't know how they handle that on the back end. I know that they have some partnerships and stuff like that. So maybe that's not an issue there. But from the outside looking in, that's what I see. The other issue that wasn't solved quite yet was going to be effectively persistent storage. And so to understand the persistent storage issue with Flux in particular, or blockchain virtual private servers or blockchain compute, whatever you want to call it, right, is that the way it works is Joe Schmo, in his basement can set up a rack, set up a server, load the software onto it, and then offer it to the network to utilize for compute, right? And that works really, really well for compute because the way they have it set up is just like, if you guys aren't familiar with virtualization, effectively you have a Docker image running, that Docker image shuts down and it just fails over to another one. The problem with that is when it fails over to the other one, it no longer has access to the data that was on the previous storage, so you lose access to the data that was there. So good for compute as long as you can implement all of the customizations for that application that you need within Docker variables. Not good for anything that would host like databases, etc. This is a problem that I think they are working on, and I don't know if they've gotten to that point yet. I think they have some other services as well. Those are the two I'm, most aware of and most excited about. So I don't think I'll dive too much into the rest of it. Those are the ones I'm also most knowledgeable about because I am a systems engineer. I deal in virtualization. I understand Docker. I was a Linux sysadmin. So all this stuff, I don't want to go too far outside my wheelhouse, right? Because I just don't know enough to do so in general. Now, the other thing I know a lot about is proof of work. And Flux has released their proof of useful work version 2 white paper. And some people have some valid concerns in relation to this announcement. So unfortunately, the thing that rubs, if you want to rub a GPU miner the wrong way off the bat, and I'll just tell you this, it doesn't matter what project you are. If you start with, there is a problem with the environmental impact of GPU mining, you just lost the entire audience. I'm sorry, but that is the political and ideological lane that separates like a lot of miners from a lot of proof of work guys from a lot of proof of stake guys. Effectively, it is the age old, global warming line. And we can argue all day over whether it is or isn't, but I'm talking about the perception of your audience, so it doesn't matter. The reason why Bud Light would go from putting a tranny on their cans to then hiring Post Malone and Shane McGinnis, is that right? For their commercials, is because what Bud Light understands is it doesn't matter what your opinion is as a company that's trying to sell to people. It matters what the opinion of the people you're selling to have. End of story. And people will get mad and they'll get on a high horse and they'll say, but this is definitely wrong and nah, nah, nah. Well, fine. If you want to do that and cut out all of those people, then you just need to understand that you lose that revenue, okay? So when Flux starts this paper out with an entire paragraph on the environmental and economic inefficiency of GPU mining, I'm just saying you probably lost a bunch of your mining audience right off the rip. Now, do they have valid concerns or not? You could go over it, right? Energy consumption, hardware waste, and market impact. I think, so from an energy, there's a couple problems here that we'll talk about, but energy consumption is high on GPU miners compared to the amount of hash. However, we have gotten to the point with Fish Hash, with Kapow, with ProgPow, to where the actual energy efficiency, meaning the amount of work the GPU is doing in relation to the amount of energy it utilizes, is at 100% almost, right? So I would disagree. I would agree on energy consumption being high, disagree on energy efficiency. Meaning, I think that there are proof of work algorithms that are extremely efficient and good at utilizing the entire GPU, which obviously also would reduce hardware waste because you're not just wasting a bunch of memory modules or a bunch of cores on that system. So there are good algorithms that have resolved these issues by and large within the GPU mining space. It does say market impact. Now, this one obviously is going to ruffle a lot of feathers, I think, but it says mining creates artificial scarcity in GPU markets, harming gaming, AI research, and content creation industries. One, I'm a content creator. Two, I'm a gamer. And three, I do participate in AI research. And so who's to tell me which one's more important? Who is to tell me what I can do with my GPU? Come on, man. I'll do whatever I want with my GPU, whenever I want, for whatever workload I need to use it for. And I don't think that making a statement that utilizing it for, one purpose is inferior to utilizing it for other purposes. Shut the up. Get out of here. And obviously, okay, here's the thing. Flux has right now has a huge GPU miner base, holder base. And these arguments have been utilized before by multiple projects, and these arguments have pissed off that base multiple times. So it's wild to me, leave this whole section out. From a PR perspective, leave it out. It's just going to piss off the people that are already holding your crypto. And if your goal is to not have people dump your crypto, you wouldn't want to do this, right? I don't know. It seems nuts to me, but okay. So there you go. As far as that is, that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. They went to centralization risks, basically saying that there's geographic concentration on mining power, which could be true to a certain extent. You have your US market, your China market. I think it's spread out a little bit more, Russia, so on. This is them justifying where they're headed. And I think this is the problem. The reason they're bringing this up, even though it's bad PR, is because they're trying to influence you to make a decision later on, right? And that is what it is. At the end of the day. So geographic concentration, mining power is disproportionately concentrated in regions with access to cheap electricity. Pool consolidation, mining pools consolidate power, undermining the principles of decentralization. This, I think there is an argument for pools encourage centralization. I think there are ways within proof of work that you could solve this. I will say that projects have attempted to solve this in the past and have failed. But there are also projects even at the Bitcoin level, like Ocean, that are coming up with new protocols to work around this problem, right? And it is a fair point, because obviously we could just go back and say, hey, look what happened to Alephium when via BTC shut down. And I could say, this is a fair point. The problem is that a majority of the space right now is going to be pool operators. And the removal of that pool operator and the GPU miners, once again, is a removal of a piece of your ecosystem, right? So I would argue that you would want to look at ways to bring these people along with you. Obviously, Ethereum tried to do this, and I think Ethermine still does some Ethereum staking. Is that right? And that could be a potential solution from that perspective. But yeah, I think even you can still stake on Ethermine. I have no idea if it's even worth it, but they got pulled along for that whole thing. And effectively, I guess pools could do that here as well. Will they? I don't know. So the other thing is they've been talking about this lately, and I'm going to talk about, because I think this is the hard part. Okay. So now we're going to get into the idea of useful work, proof of useful work, obviously used by a lot of projects here recently, like Flux, like Dynex, and so on. Useful work is this idea that, at least as it wasn't, here's the problem. Proof of useful work was initially proposed as a solution in which the hashing algorithm would include some form of useful work along with it, meaning that while you're hashing, while you're doing work on the network, you're also providing some other type of work, whether that is rendering, whether that is AI, whatever that work is somehow integrated into the hashing algorithm. Now, every single time that we've seen this so far, that has turned into some form of centralization out of necessity for the quality of service. That's just, unfortunately, a fact of it. So when you start moving that direction, you do end up moving into a more centralized direction. Some things will always have to be centralized because you have to have a central point of exchange to an extent for a service, right? Whether that's you go to the Xbox store to buy a video game, or you go to Steam to buy the video game, or you go directly to the publisher's website to buy the video game. What you have to have there, and this is going to bring up my biggest issue with Flux on their VPS side, is that you have to have open source software that allows people to create multiple marketplaces for exchange. That is where you would create the decentralization there. In relation to Flux, right, you're pretty much forced to go through the ZIL Core wallet to rent a VPS server, to sign the contract and all of that. I think that stuff needs to be opened up to the public so that people can create with the Flux ecosystem multiple storefronts. That would be an idea I have. I don't know where it will go from there. Now, so it says, unlike Flux OS nodes, which is currently the current iteration or whatever, which provide real world services. I can never say real world. Do you guys have problems with that? I do. Current GPU mining yields no productive external output. So that's the argument. We've heard that argument. I gave you some of my little spice to add on top of that. And then this is their proposed shift. And this is where things start to fall apart. So keep in mind what they've said is, here's all the things bad with GPU mining and proof of work that have been arguments made by Ethereum, by everybody that's made the shift, right? Like we could go down the list, like what, BlockX, what was it? Was it Neoxa or Chlor? We could go down this list. Here's what happens. So let's give you guys a history lesson on what happens to projects that eventually move from proof of work to master nodes. Now, people can argue that master nodes are a little bit different and blah, 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 but let's just give you an idea. So historically, there have been a lot of projects that initially start as proof of work that then move to master nodes. Master nodes are a form of staking in which you host the virtual private server yourself and you lock up some crypto for basically a chance to win a block. It's effectively gambling, in my humble opinion, but that's what it is, right? So you're basically saying, hey, buy my asset, right? Put it into a wallet that you can't change, right? And that you can't control anymore without taking like massive losses in a lot of cases. And then I promise you I will give you a portion of the rewards of every block for X amount of time. The more people that do it, the less of the portion of the reward you will get. And the more a single person puts into their pool, the more of the reward they will individually get, effectively creating centralization of the token itself. The reason this is done is frankly just straight up has always been known to be related to multi-level marketing, to some sort of pyramid scheme, because it is effectively manipulating the supply to drive the artificial price of that cryptocurrency up. And so the kind of the scam thing that's been going on lately in proof of work is a project will start out as proof of work. Rogu did it, basically named Rug. There's been a lot, and they all do it. There's been a ton. That's the most recent one. And then they will convince everybody to lock that token up there by driving the price up, because it brings the actual amount in circulation down. And then the dev takes everything that they own and they sell it then at the highest possible price, thereby driving the price all the way back down. Usually that is followed up by some delisting by an exchange, and effectively you are stuck with some virtual private server running a master node for a project that has nobody using it and no demand for the token. So historically, that's what's happened, okay? So I'm going to tell you that because you need to understand why people are upset with this, okay? We can always say that's not the intentions of this particular developer. But at the end of the day, it is effectively why people are apprehensive to what is happening here, right? So they're going to propose a shift from proof of work to proof of useful work version 2. And in that, all block validation and production will be handled by Flux OS nodes, the Cumulus, the Nimbus, and the Stratus. Now, Flux doesn't just have one single master node, they have multiple levels, and obviously the more you pay, the more rewards you get, okay? So it's master nodes with effectively 3 options here. They will have to run full daemons and meet benchmark standards. And block rewards are primarily distributed to Flux OS nodes, reinforcing the node economy and driving infrastructure growth. Obviously, what they're also trying to do here is encourage people to swap their hardware over to these types of things. So it goes over why not proof of stake. I think, and the thing is like, nodes aren't technically proof of stake because proof of stake is typically doesn't require a compute component. And that's why I say this is closer to master nodes than that, right? So proof of stake limitations, while proof of stake is energy efficient, it can lead to wealth-based centralization. I mean, you're going to release, what is it? Let's look at this. Okay. Wait, hold on. If I can have as many nodes as I want, and I'm rewarded for having more flux in a single node, then I get paid more. But proof of stake, it's so obvious that I don't know what to say. This is like, it's like the Epstein list all over again. It's crazy, man. Like, do I even need to go on at this point? Okay. So proof of useful work ensures decentralization by requiring operational infrastructure rather than a mere token staking. Proof of useful work is just a new name for master nodes. I want to make that clear. Before we get any further, okay, here is the YouTube short reel for you right now. Flux proof of useful work is just a new name for marketing to use for masternodes. Capiche? And there is no wordplay, jumping around, BS that you're going to be able to tell me that is going to make me think that it's anything different at this point. Okay? It is so insane. And the problem is like, I know that Jeff Key or whatever, when people ask like questions that I've asked about proof of work in the past, has been like, oh, Son of a Tech is mentally ill. No, you're just a gaslighter, bro. Like, the whole project is just gaslighting you with marketing terms. I hope you enjoyed this clip from the Crypto Mining Show. If you would like to see more from this particular episode, take a look up here. Don't forget to also subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support me directly, you can go to sonofatech.locals.com and become a member. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next Tuesday.